All right, bottom of the hour on the Bash, 97.3 ESPN inside the Bet Black Kia studios. I'm Mike. That's Pete over there. Sixers with a big win last night. I say big win. Whenever they win without Embiid seems to be almost a surprise, but should it be anymore? They've kind of demonstrated that they can win without the big guy, but do they want to win without Joel Embiid? You know, there's been a lot of speculation about that, but I really want to get into the mind. Bobby Marks was in the front office with the Nets. He's now the front office insider for the Vertical, and get his take on the mentality of these front offices now. Bobby, is there a thought in the NBA that losing is actually better than winning?
Well, I think if in Philadelphia, I mean, how much more losing do you want to go through here? And I think
not just Philadelphia though, not just Philadelphia, but league wide. Like, do you think that the thought process is that, hey, it's better off being a 20-win team than it is a 33-win team?
Well, I mean, we won 12 games in 2010, and that still didn't get us the number one pick. We fell to 3, and Washington wound up getting John Wall, and we got Derek Favors. So I think, you know, I don't know if there's karma when it comes to the lottery balls, but I think there's something. Certainly, something has to do with a little bit. I think you've got to put some type of foundation in place. And I know I've heard some criticism. We can talk about Miami and that streak they went on when they won, 13 games, and they went from, a 10 or 11 win team to a couple games out of the playoffs. But you've got to have something to sell to free agents and agents when you get into the offseason. If your direction is, besides the draft, if you want to use, cap space to bring in some NBA level players. And I think that's where you've seen a little bit of the difference in Philadelphia, and not from a playoff team, but a team that's improved when you've added Henderson, you got Ilyasova in a pick in the draft, and you started to put some NBA quality players out there along with your draft pick. So I'm not in the mindset. I get it when maybe we get to April and you're a team that's out of a playoff, and you want to use your younger players more and, maybe cut back on some of your veteran minutes and experiment with different lineups. But, we're still in mid-February here right now.
Bobby Marks with us, front office insider at the Vertical, 20 years NBA experience inside front offices around the league, mainly with the Nets. And, you look at what's going on in Philly right now with Jahlil Okafor. What's your sense on what kind of calls or what kind of job Brian Colangelo has to do in this situation?
Well, it's interesting regarding Okafor because I don't recall a player ever being held out of a game with the reason being that he was involved in trade discussions. We've certainly, when I was in New Jersey and Brooklyn, have held players out of a game when there's been a framework of a deal that's been agreed upon, or we couldn't do the trade call to the next day and we held the player out that night. But to hold him out of to games is a little bit confusing there. It certainly assumes that he will be moved, if not by the end of the week here, by the time of the deadline next Thursday. It's a matter of what his value is right now. I mean, is he worth a first round pick? Certainly, but you have to remember, I mean, he was a low lottery pick. I think he was the third pick in the overall draft. In this year's draft, you won't be able to get that return here. So it is interesting as far as what you do with Okafor. If you do move him, that certainly is a sign that Noel is going to be part of the team, and then you'll have to figure out as far as how much you want to pay him when you get into the offseason.
What's in your mind? What's fair value for a guy like Okafor at this point? Because we've been hearing kind of a first-round pick for next year, something in the middle. People want to protect their picks. If you're the Sixers, do you hold out for something, maybe in that upper lottery?
Well, I don't think you'll get a lottery pick this year in 2017. Those picks right now are gold, and you've seen a couple first-round picks for 2017 move in the last couple of days. The Plumlee trade over the weekend, and that's a pick that's in the mid-20s that goes to Portland. We saw the Ibaka trade. That pick right now is 25. So I think if you want to get add another pick, it's going to be somewhere in the 20s. Certainly for this year. When you talk about 2018, can you get a protected, late lottery protected pick? You certainly can. That will be the biggest thing that Brian has to figure out. Can you also get maybe another a piece from a rotational standpoint? I don't know if the goal is to move Okafor, and even if you do get a pick, to take on a bad contract. I think I'd rather hold on to him, wait until the offseason, and maybe you can get a better deal when you get closer to the draft.
Bobby, what's your opinion on how the Sixers have handled the Embiid stuff? Overly cautious? Are they smart? Many people here feel that it gives the impersonation or the impression that they want to lose.
Well, it's interesting, and I've read a little bit of the stuff because it went from, I guess, a bone bruise, and now it looks like he's got a little bit of a meniscus tear there. The one thing I learned in New Jersey and in Brooklyn when you deal with medical stuff is that you've got to be really out front with a player's condition as far as and when you deal with the media. I mean, these guys aren't. I mean, the guys who cover your team are not dumb. They do it on a day-to-day basis. They're a part, almost an extension of your PR department. As far as from a holding him out standpoint, I think if there is certainly it looks like there's a little bit of a meniscus there. I think you do have to be overly cautious just because of his prior history of him being out the last couple of years, where you don't want any more setbacks to it. I mean, a player that you guys have seen the last 4 or 5 months who can certainly be certainly a franchise level player.
How about Simmons? There's a lot of talk that he's not even going to do any 5-on-5 over this break. It's starting to feel, Bobby, around here that he might not play at all. If you're inside that Sixers front office at this point, do they feel that they don't gain anything by not playing him? I mean, it has that feeling that they rather sit these guys out because they've done it in the past. And I know Colangelo's new, but you wonder if that even comes above from ownership.
Well, Simmons is interesting because I thought he would be back right around that, right around the All-Star break, especially when he broke his foot, early in the year, and I guess that was in, right in October. So that is a little more interesting. That's probably more of the cautious approach. It would be interesting if Philly right now, let's say, was 10 games above 500, and you're fighting for home court as far as what the direction would be as far as getting him on there. Eventually, he's going to have to be he's going to have to get on the court. So now we're probably looking at summer league now. So the focus now shifts from the last 24, 25 games to mini camp when we get into June, and then when we get into summer league in Vegas here.
So you don't see him playing this year?
That the sense right now is I don't. I think I'd be more surprised if he stepped on the court than if he didn't right now.
Ersan Ilyasova, Bobby, do you think he has value? Would you move him if you were Colangelo?
Well, he's an expiring, so you've got to figure out what your goal is. Do you want to take back money as far as a player with multiple years left that eats into your cap space? The challenge for Brian and the group now is that you've had a little bit success right now is that how does Ilyasova, how does Gerald Henderson, how does Sergio Rodriguez, players like that, do they fit into your plans for next season? So that's something they've got to weigh here. Can you get I don't see them getting a first for him. I think that would be hard, although they acquired one for him. But he does have value. It's a good number. It's an expiring. If a team wants to take him on as a rental for the next 2 or 3 months, he's certainly a good name there.
Bobby Marks with us from the Vertical Front Office Insider. Some NBA moves. What's your take on today's Raptors Orlando deal? I think that's really an interesting. You mentioned Ilyasova. They gave up Ilyasova, Oladipo, Sabonis, basically to get Ibaka and then ship him out for Terrence Ross. A lot happened in Orlando just to end up with Ross, and I guess they get a pick in that deal. But what did you think of the deal between Toronto and Orlando today?
Well, that's the danger of giving up a lot of assets for an expiring contract with Ibaka back last June when you basically gave up Oladipo and Sabonis and Ilyasova, and you kind of push your chips to the middle a little bit. If you're Rob Hennigan, the GM in Orlando, and then you went out and signed Biyombo and Fournier and Jeff Green, those guys where you thought you had a playoff team in. And, the sense was that Ibaka was not going to resign there. And if it was going to come at a high cost. So you kind of cut bait and you move him to Toronto and you save face a little bit where you get a Terrence Ross and a pick that's going to be in the 20s. I think for Toronto, it's a home run. There's no risk at all there. Now you get Ibaka. You give up a pick that's in the 20s. Now you'll have bird rights on him. You'll be able to sign him and go over the salary cap. He's got the same agent as Kyle Lowry, who's also could be a free agent this summer. So that's a benefit there. And I think when you watch this Toronto team a little bit lately, they've become a little bit too predictable here. They're 4-10 in the last 14 and 7-0 games against teams under 500. So for the health of the organization, I think it was a deal they certainly had to make here.
Bobby, Mike and I talked about the Lakers and their situation. What would your advice be to the Lakers front office? How do they play out their situation? Because if they win games, they are actually losing potentially with that Sixers protected pick, right? So what's the best way for them to play out the rest of their season?
Well, it's a double negative. If they, how that, with that Orlando pick in 2019 also is that possibly could go, to the Magic based on what happens with this, the Laker pick there too. So it is interesting because if the Lakers do keep it, the Magic then get 2 second rounds and, that pick goes unprotected to Philly next year. And it's hard when you have a first-year coach. You're trying, and we talked about it earlier in the show. You're trying to put some type of foundation. And they've played a little bit better of late, and I guess we'll see how the balls bounce when we get into mid-May if they're going to keep it or if the Band-Aid's going to be ripped off here.
Bobby, are there times where the front office elbows the team or a coach to maybe rest guys, or does that happen?
You know what? That's a hard one because you want the coach and you want to put the best players out there, but then you also have to look at what's the best interest of the organization long term. And there certainly have been circumstances where you want to get a look at, and I don't want to say tanking, but you do want to get a look at some of your younger players as far as your players who either have non-guaranteed contracts next year or are fighting for roster spots when you get towards the tail end of the season, those last few games here. Those games certainly could sway a ping pong ball or here or there. So I wouldn't say you don't force feed a coach as far as what lineups you can put out there, but I think you do certainly have to have a discussion with him as far as what players that you maybe want to look at that could impact you, or you might want to cut bait when the season gets over.
Bobby, you see Okafor getting moved?
I do. I do see him getting moved. It will be interesting. And I think when we look at teams that are, fighting to get into playoffs, those teams in that 7 to 9 range, we heard New Orleans last week. Could it be possibly, a team like Chicago? What one of those teams is willing to give up an asset, for Okafor that they maybe think can get them over the hump here.
Bobby Marks, really good stuff. Check him out at The Vertical at Bobby Marks. 42, 20 years NBA experience with the Nets, a former assistant GM out there, and a couple of NBA Finals trips while he was with the former New Jersey Nets and now Brooklyn Nets. Bobby, we always enjoy your work, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.
You got it. And that's coming from a guy who worked in a front office there talking about